Now, it gives me great pleasure now to introduce our next session, and it's all about how to lead, motivate, and engage. And to host the session, our speaker has numerous accolades, including being listed in the 2019 Hotelier Middle East Power List, and more recently in the Middle East 25 Women in Hospitality Power List. She is the winner of CEO's Today's 2020 Business Woman of the Year recognition in hospitality. As CEO of Curtin Hospitality, she has an innovative mindset that has established the organization as a disruptive, dynamic, international hospitality group dedicated to the management of mixed-use developments in key global destinations. Please welcome Marlos Kippenberg. Marlos.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. That was an incredible introduction. I can only say thank you very much for introducing me this way. I would like to introduce here our panel today, all around leadership, powered and brought to you by Robb, who is the founder of Positive Reframe, and Ashley Giles, who is the managing director of Men's Cricket, England. That has to be, but also former Warwickshire and England's first-class cricketer. So very curious to hear more. And then myself. Our panel today is powered by WIH Global, which is founded and led by Lisa Angle, who you will hear a little later, with 450 women and 50 men who together are forming a best-in-class community who believe that by collaborating, we can really have a greater impact and raise the game to create a hospitality industry that is more diverse and inclusive. So I think there's even greater meaning to the panel that we're going to have. This panel is going to be 3 presentations by us individually, and you'll see us all come together at the end in conversation. So first of all, Mark, welcome. We are looking very much forward to see what you're going to bring us. Mark, you're specializing in how leaders create a culture to drive staff engagement and increase customer delight, which are always great words to hear. But from what we understand is that you have had an incredible commercial impact on some of the UK's largest brands and companies. So we're very much looking forward to hear from you. Over to you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Thank you for that lovely introduction, and good afternoon to everybody. In 10 minutes, what I'm going to try and do is give a few of the key headlines on how to lead, motivate, and engage. And hopefully you'll see my slides just coming up now as well. As you know, some of these sessions being expanded into more complete masterclasses on the 26th of January in my case. And so that'll be a dense look at all the practical tools, tips, techniques on how to lead, motivate, and engage. And a chance to look at some of the research, really, that gives you empirical proof of things that make a quantifiable difference to people's emotional commitment. And as Marlo said, this is stuff that I've been doing, consulting in organizations like Coca-Cola and M&S and Pinot Cruises and Specsavers and Marriott over the last 20 years. So all practically applicable stuff. And what I thought I'd do for the next 10 minutes is give you a few key headlines of things, maybe you give you whet your appetite a little for the 26th, but also give you practical things you can take away and use now as well. So we're thinking about engagement, and engagement is a technical term. And so if you look at Gallup's work on engagement, they would say there's essentially 3 types of employee in any organization. You can see them on the screen here. Some people are indeed engaged, which means loyal, productive, find your work satisfying, emotionally connected. So people who are engaged are there with their hearts as well as their heads. And the key distinction here is discretionary effort, something extra that you get when people are engaged. You can also see the term not engaged, which means, let's say, neutral, going through the motions, maybe doing the bare minimum. And then there are some who are actually disengaged. They're coming to work to make it worse for other people. I don't know if you've met such figures. They're out there, well poisoners. And so Gallup really studied this across the world. And I'll just show you some of the UK data and then some of the other country data. Now, as you're watching this, I don't know if you'd have a guess in your own mind about how this might break down. So, 100% of employees, what percentage are engaged? Well, starting with the UK, disappointingly, only 11% of people are engaged, so 1 out of 10. I don't know whether that's a shocking figure or not, but that's the reality. Not engaged is a pretty beefy 68%, which leaves a rather troubling 21%. So two ways of looking at this data. One way would be to say, well, if only 11% of people are engaged, then, let's say at best 89% of people are not engaged. And, because if only 11% of people are engaged, the remainder are at best neutral. But another way of looking at this is that, the actively disengaged number is, let's say, nearly double the engaged number, which is clearly a problem. Now, of course, this varies a little bit around the world, and some countries are better than other countries. And so I don't know if you'd have a guess yourself at which countries might be best, and indeed whether you think you might top the polls. But the reality is worldwide engagement is only 15%. And Western Europe at 10, you might see there, makes the UK's 11 look pretty much in line. Within Western Europe, the Scandinavian countries are the best. But actually, worldwide, as you can see, the best is the Americas. And the US, if you extrapolate that out from US and Canada, is actually 33%. So a third of the workforce are engaged there, which is significantly better than many other parts around the world. Now, world class would be 2/3 of your workforce engaged, or a 9-to-1 ratio of engaged to actively disengaged in the organization. So even if you only had 30% of your people engaged, let's say, if you had 3% active disengagement, you would be world class by that metric, which is a 10-to-1 ratio. Now, of course, the question is, what happens when one finds organizations where you have 60-70% engagement? It's all possible. And you get a really distinct shift and difference in the financials of the organization. And so when you actually look at top quartile compared to bottom quartile business units, what are some of the differences? Well, you can see them here on the screen. And so, customer metrics are 10 points higher when people are engaged. Productivity is 17% higher. Sales and profit go up over 20%. But what's also interesting is what falls away. And so, as you can see, absenteeism falls over 41%. Now, staff turnover reducing. So even in high turnover organizations like parts of hospitality, let's say, you can still reduce your staff turnover by a quarter, and lower turnover organizations almost eliminate it. Shrinkage goes down, safety incidents and so forth go down. And so you can see some of the numbers and data here. Now, the point is, all of the things that we want increase, and all of the things that we don't want fall away when people are engaged. So it's a foundational seed plot of so many other good organizational outcomes. And the key question is, well, what makes the difference? And so the punchline of Gallup's research is the thing that makes the biggest difference to engagement is the immediate line manager. That's it. And so actually the key is the interplay between immediate line manager and direct report. That's where all the action happens. And in fact, there's a whole recipe of elements that leaders should be focusing on to drive that. But the immediate line manager accounts for 70% of a person's engagement. And that means whoever is leading, managing others in your organization has got to know the critical things to do to drive engagement, because it's a foundational seed plot of so many other good organizational outcomes. And engagement is also predictive, by which I mean sales and profit are not predictive. They don't tell you what's about to happen next. They're the fruit that we all want, of course, but actually the predictive metrics are things like the customer, and even deeper, things like engagement. There's an additional side benefit for engagement, which is it does affect well-being as well. And so actually, Gallup have these three categories of thriving, struggling, and suffering. And the big sort of insight here is that people who are engaged at work are 3 times more likely to feel like they are thriving in life than people who are actively disengaged. So engagement is great for people. It's also great for organizations. So it's one of these very few genuine win-wins. Now, as I said, in the masterclass, what I'll be doing is explaining, all of the factors that immediate line managers need to be focusing on to drive engagement. But just a quick couple of insights on that. What you're really trying to do when you're driving engagement is balance a couple of key factors. And first of all, people's need for clarity, and secondly, their need for freedom. And so these are continuum, all the way from low clarity to high clarity, and, constrained to completely free. Now, classically, organizations, and John was mentioning a short time ago, traditional organizations built on the Industrial Revolution paradigm, would be high on clarity but low on freedom. So policy, procedure, process runs the show, people are restricted. The difficulty is that can create a team that are non-intelligently compliant. So people will do things they're asked to do, do, but they also switch their brains off a bit in the process. Now, it's not completely flawed. You can get some results, but it's obviously suboptimal and possibly described as the easiest, least worst option. Now, sometimes people make a mistake when they think about engagement, which is they think they should just set their people free. But if you think clarity and freedom are two ends of a scale, which they're not, they're two completely separate things, then what people will do is they'll decrease clarity and increase freedom. The trouble then is you might end up with complete chaos. And that's some leaders fear and even experience, maybe with good intentions when they set their people free and got wacky things happening. In the bottom left-hand corner, if you pull back on the freedom, but you don't increase the clarity, well, people will just tune out and disengage. And so one of the reasons that people go for high clarity and low freedom is that non-intelligent compliance in the top left is actually better than apathy and anarchy. Now, it might not be better for the soul, but it's certainly better for business, but it's also not the sweet spot. And so the sweet spot is where clarity and freedom are both high. Now, that does sound a little bit counterintuitive, but it is also possible. That's when people get engaged. Loyal, productive, find the work satisfying, wake up with a spring in their step, can't wait to get at it. And that means actually having high clarity and high freedom. Now, I know that sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but it is possible. And so what happens is clarity should always be high, because anytime clarity is low, we run the apathy and anarchy risk. So we can take that straight off the table, but also we want to add freedom to the clarity. Critically, what that does is it changes the type of clarity. In the robots box, clarity is instructional. Do this, then do that, do this, then do that. Over in the engagement box, clarity is destinational. This is where we need to get to, and I'm relaxed on how. And so instead of prescribing every step in the journey, I spend more time describing the destination. And that's a critical distinction. And so actually moving clarity to destinational rather than directional is a big shift for getting emotional commitment. And incidentally, I'm not against policy, procedure, process. That would be crazy. But what I'm for is process plus. In the engagement box, policy, procedure, process is a foundational minimum standard that you can't fall below, but you're free to innovate and improve on top. In the robots box, it's a law from which you can't deviate. It's a straitjacket that binds. And so I want process as a foundation to build on, not as a straitjacket to bind. And the final element of this really is that the only way of safely devolving control to people is to increase their capability. And so actually, interestingly, somebody who's low capability or brand new first day on the job, the top left-hand box is not suboptimal. I mean, not being a robot, but having lots of clarity, not much freedom, super helpful when you're new, it doesn't stay motivating. And some people's story is that their capability is if you like, further along than they're being given freedom. And if there's a gap between people's capability and the freedom they're given, they start to tune out and disengage. And so actually what we've got to do is map freedom to capability, or even more importantly, probably, what we need to do is deliberately, intentionally grow capabilities so we can safely devolve control. And so high clarity, high freedom, and high capability are a sort of foundation that allow us to maximize emotional commitment. And actually, if we want to get all of the business benefits that I outlined a couple of moments ago, then finding that sweet spot is critical. So, I mean, I hope that gives you just a few flavors. As I said, when I run the masterclass on the 26th of February, what I'll be doing is unpacking that, and particularly going through the 28 factors for creating the conditions for success for engagement. That's drawn from 3 research studies that give you 28 practical go-tos of things you can immediately use and get your immediate line managers to use to actually help people arrive in the sweet spot in the top left-hand corner. Well, I'll pause there and hand over tomorrow. So I think I'll be introducing Ashley, and see you shortly for a bit of Q&A.